Audos is a family of AI copilots for entrepreneurs to help them make progress on their next business idea. And it'll take you through a couple of questions to very quickly basically ask you, who's the customer you want to serve? What does that person need or want, and why can't they get it? And then it starts to kind of pitch you and brainstorm with you a number of solutions to that problem.
Welcome back to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske. It's great to be back with you. Love being your host, and I love having you there. I know that the feedback that's coming through is just great. Thank you very much for all of your support. Now, on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming founder of Audos, the AI Copilot for Entrepreneurs, Mr. Nicholas Thorne. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you, Rick. Nice to be here.
Yes, absolute pleasure to have you here. Now, you and I are going to be talking about how to navigate the entrepreneurial challenges that come with starting a business, innovations in consumer engagement, and how to turn your ideas into reality with AI. Now, this is a massive space. It's very hard to look left or right without seeing something to do with AI. But prior to doing that, Nick, tell us where you're calling in from.
I'm both calling from and born and raised in New York City.
Oh, beautiful. Now, what's a highlight of New York City for you? Why do you love it so much?
Oh man. I'll give you a kind of funny answer to that question, which is I love the race into the subway in the morning, and that is because it's completely insane and it's completely illogical. So near my house, if you get to the place next to where the subway, you can get down into the subway. If you were there every morning, you would see a huge crowd of people. I mean, it's not like Times Square, but a gathering of people who are waiting across the street for the light to change to, walk quite quickly across the street to go down into the subway to be the first ones on the platform in order that they could be the first ones onto the subway. Now, this, if you study it, is a really bad idea. It basically just means that you are going to be in the middle of the subway, the one who's most jam-packed into the center of this thing at the commuting time. So it makes no sense other than if you just get the vibe of New York City, which is that it's like everything, as fast as humanly possible, happening now. And that is definitely not, good for your probably longevity or your, blood pressure. But it's just a ton of fun. And I think I don't know, there's another way of saying I just love the energy here.
Yes.
In as much as I was born here, I literally, grew up from within the city. It's a little bit, I don't know anything else. So maybe therefore it's just my home.
Natural bias. I love it. Thank you very much for sharing. One thing I do know about New York subways is that the busking scene, you sometimes get really random stars performing in the subway systems. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I haven't seen any. I don't know that I've seen any stars. I definitely have moments where you're down there and you can tell that someone from Broadway or something is just practicing and they're singing, or someone, you definitely hear in particular about people who are, in the craft, either, musical theater or, our violinists and at Carnegie Hall, people who are incredibly talented and they're standing there and they, you don't know any better, because I certainly, while I can maybe recognize a nice voice, I don't know if it's, where it is on the spectrum. But you definitely have some performances where you're just like, you get goosebumps and you're like, well, this is crazy, and then you're just standing there on the subway platform.
Do you have any aspirations at all to maybe one day move to a different location and live?
Oh, I think a lot about it. I have young children. My wife happens to be from here too, and so it's not an inexpensive way to live life, and so I think we think often about are we taking advantage of what it has to offer. On the one hand, we can go 5 blocks and be in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and standing in front of some of the humanity's greatest creativity, and but we don't always do that. And so we try to think hard about, are we getting the most out of being here? We're actually going to spend this summer or a decent chunk of it in Copenhagen, where my business partner is from and lives and works. And so we're going to get a little bit of a change of pace, which we try to do a lot during the summer. I have the good fortune of working in a line of work where it's not overly tied to a specific location. And so we try to take advantage of that.
Yeah. So what do you do when with your downtime? Do you get much downtime?
Well, with little, it depends on whether you consider, hanging out with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old
Oh, I
downtown.
feel your pain.
Uh, but if you do, then my answer, if you do not, my answer is I spend time with those children. If that doesn't count as the downtime, then there's not a lot of downtime at the moment because you know we've been in the business of starting companies for a decade or so, through a variety of form factors, but now in particular are really um, spending all this time on trying to figure out how do you make AI good for entrepreneurship, and we express that mission, if you will, through this company Audos that we've been building, and the set of tooling that it represents. And so that when you're caught up in the middle of something like that and you feel like you're doing, I guess what I'd call your life's work. It means that every extra minute, you're not feeling forced to do that. You just are excited to get to work and do a little bit more. So I have a very good balance. I'm certainly not complaining, but I don't think there's a ton of downtime.
Yeah, that's for sure and certain. As an entrepreneur, we're always going to be committing our time somewhere, and sometimes things have to miss out just for that a little bit of time until you get some momentum. But
So
are you an early riser? What's a day look like for you?
you know, I wish I were a little bit earlier, but I'm probably out of bed and at 'em by 6 in the morning, every day. But again, that's driven in at least to some extent by the fact that my children are not far behind that. So I wish I could say that was more often because I had the discipline to um, get up and sit and have a cup of coffee and maybe work out and do these things, before the day really got going in my house. But that's not always the case. In often case, it's because my crew is also early to rise. So anyway, that's roughly when I'm up. I've always tried to get up at a decent hour, but I'm sure I'm one of these people like many that feel like it's never early enough.
Never early enough. Look, I find it fascinating speaking with somebody like you. I've watched a number of your previous interviews and I'm looking at all the systems that you're involved with, Nick, and it's incredible what you're doing. And I'd love to take a bit of a deep dive into that in a few moments. But I always like to ask, what was your first entrepreneurial experience? Mine was washing cars.
um, Well, I know for sure my first kind of job, and I don't know, I guess I'm going to count it as some semi-entrepreneurial because I was 10 and I got a job, cleaning toilets at the local tennis club. And, I think that was maybe more my first like employment experience as much as anything. But I felt like it was semi-entrepreneurial because at least I like had to go out of my way as a 10-year-old to even get that job. My first real entrepreneurial experience in college, and I was actually talking to someone about this today. I remember buying my first Facebook ad for a business, which has ended up being more of a theme in life than I probably anticipated at the time. But I bought my first Facebook ad as a like I don't know, a junior or so in college. So I don't know if I remove the lemonade stands and things like that. My roommate and I at that time, we built a website called dormdogs.com, and we were doing in-room delivery of dorm room essentials, which I must say was pre-smartphones and
Before the day.
pre-local, pre-same day, pre-delivery being like the soup du jour, because it was, I don't know, 2007 or something. But it is a funny thing where I kind of imagine that if you brushed off that pitch, I've had this experience now a couple times in my career. If you brushed off that pitch like 10 years later, you wouldn't have been too far off of something
Oh,
that I
wow.
think a
You
lot of
had,
people thought was pretty compelling.
yeah.
So it was kind of fun, but that's probably what I think of as being really, in large part, what had gotten me. I never really left that moment, despite
No.
taking a couple of turns from there on.
Yeah, great feedback. Thanks again. You touched on tennis there. I wonder, are you a sports person? Do you either like being involved or do you watch it? What do you get
Yeah,
into?
all the above, all the above. I mean, I
Hmm.
definitely don't get enough of a chance to play, relatively speaking. Although now that I have two sons, and I guess I feel like I've now said that 1,000 times. So
Two boys?
apologies
Nah,
if you're
that's
listening.
fine. I got two
I'm the type
boys
of
as
person
well.
who's keeps saying it over and over again.
Nah, that's fine.
But so they're getting a little bit more into that kind of stuff. But I love sports. Sports happens to be, yeah, is been always been a very big part of my life. Whether playing it, albeit not very well, I'm sure, or consuming it and watching it.
In some
I
way.
definitely have always been very interested in it.
As a father myself, I often think about my legacy for them, and I know it's early days for you, given how young they are. But In turn, looking at your own life when you were growing up, was there anybody in your sort of formative years that was inspirational for you and a guiding light, a northern star, as they say?
Oh man. I mean, countless really. I had the good fortune of amazing teachers and coaches.
Yeah.
And so almost too many to mention. I did have one coach in particular who was, particularly meaningful in my life. And I ended up reflecting a lot on them recently because they unfortunately have just, passed away.
Mm.
But I think the answer to that question is mostly that my parents and were served that role. And I had an older, I have an older brother. And the collection of them, as I was the younger of two boys in a 4-person family, so I was the baby, and everything was. I had a very clear northern star, and it just had a three body. It was a 3-body problem.
Yeah, I love it.
And I just felt at every moment that it was very clear what success looked like, and that largely was emulating the qualities of that crew of people that I had the good fortune of following behind.
It's a wonderful thing to be blessed with people like that in your life. And again, thank you for sharing. Now, just for the sake of context, for people who are listening today, Nick, what's I guess your educational and professional background?
Yeah. So I guess I said I grew up here in New York City. I went to undergrad. I got my undergraduate degree at Yale,
Mm-hmm.
where I studied a variety of things, actually, which is one of the great parts of liberal arts education. But I think technically I was ultimately like a history major, but I think that's probably just because it was like the thing that was most generic across my varied interests.
Of course. Yep.
And then I went and worked on Wall Street out of college. So I did what I guess for people on the East Coast of the U.S. is probably like a very vanilla, you get an internship as a junior in college, and then you try to get yourself a job, and then you get a job, and then you go and you spend 2 years, basically strapped to your desk. I happened to really enjoy the experience I had. I was at Goldman Sachs and had the good fortune of, working with some very talented people who were unbelievably kind with their time, and they're at 3 a.m. teaching you how to do stuff when
Yeah, wow.
they could have easily been home,
Yep.
with their families. So I feel I had like the very best version. While maybe the vanilla path, I feel I had as good a version of that experience as anyone you can imagine. But I would always just tell people, and I don't know that I really knew what I was saying when I was saying it, but I would always say, I just need an idea and I'm going to get out of here. And at least relative to my peers who were very committed to, a finance track and were going and getting themselves jobs at private equity firms and hedge funds, which I probably couldn't have gotten anyway. I had the logic of that I felt like I wanted to start something. And maybe that's because I'd had these experiences in college or whatever they may be. I think I was starting to pick up on, what I now realize were some of the shifting dynamics in the world of, super early stage entrepreneurship, in particular that both, digital marketing, harkening back to buying that first Facebook ad on the
Yep.
one hand, and, cloud computing on the other, had made a lot of the startup costs variable. And so at least, less of a barrier to entry was the kind of capital side of the equation. And it was more about, could you understand a customer problem in a really interesting and distinct way? And I think that ultimately has been a through line in what I've spent the rest of my career, which is 15 or so years now,
Time
doing
flies.
and thinking about, which is just like how do you help people figure out who they want to serve, why they want to serve them, what problem that person needs solved, and how do you create kind of a really tight relationship between kind of entrepreneur and customer, and what happens if you can kind of get that right. And there's a lot to get right there. There's a lot of timing to get lucky with. There's all sorts of dynamics, but certainly that's where that all started.
Yeah, wow,
But
what
so
a
I was just
story.
saying that, and I said to people I need an idea, and then I met my business partner, the guy that's been my business partner and mentor and friend and colleague ever since, who was about 10 years older than I. And so I fed him the same line. I said, I need an idea and I'm going to get out. And thankfully he kind of called BS on that. And he said, well, or he called my bluff at least. And he said, well, if all you're waiting for is an idea, I got lots of ideas. So good news. And that was the beginning of the next chapter, which has just continued pretty much to this day.
And we're going to obviously take a deep dive into all of the things that you've done in business, not only from an operational standpoint, but from a top level standpoint, managing and working with other people and AI in itself. But before we do, Nick, tell me, you've got a lot of books behind you. Do you think that ongoing education is important, and what you're reading at the moment?
Oh man. I definitely, I try to read. I don't read as much as I did pre-children, not to make that the ongoing theme of
No, I get it. I get it.
I don't. I wish I did more of it. We've been even trying to write a book, and that's really a difficult version of, if you can't read, if you don't have time to read books, you definitely shouldn't write a book. But we're getting close on that front. But what am I reading right now? To be honest with you, I'm not even sure what I'm reading right now. I've just been let me grab my thing here and go into my Kindle and figure out what I've been making most recently.
I thought you might have been an audiobook type of guy.
Well, I try to just do a little bit of reading on the subway, and for whatever reason, I have not ended up becoming that much of a listener. Well, actually, the thing I have right now is the 3-Body Problem. That's funny, up on my list, and but I very quickly started listening or watching that on Netflix. So that I don't even know that counts.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Whatever you're into. I mean, it's funny how we can link the chain together. Sometimes nonfiction, fiction always gives us, just tidbits of new ideas that we can take. Even if you take just one little idea from a book, do you find that valuable?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I also feel like I can find and provide to your show notes or something if it's helpful, but I can't quite. I read a great article at one point. It was in a newsletter that's written and curated by a good friend of mine, Dan Shipper, and it was all about reading a little bit more purposefully, and in particular not necessarily just following through the kind of linear progression of the book just because that's how it was written. I mean, like if you have the time, that's great.
Yeah.
But there are these strategies for navigating a book if you maybe can't read the whole thing, or if you're making a judgment about whether it's worth reading. And so I in particular find that, I mean, certainly with nonfiction, and I certainly realize this as we're writing a book, is like, you put your best material in the first 10% of the book. So I try very hard to, more often than not, read the first 10% of many books than the 100% of a smaller number. And I think that aligns very closely to what you said, which is, there's obvious value to take from almost anything that someone has taken the time to, get into that form factor. And that's part of what I like about it. I mean, for me, not to say that I wasn't reading a lot of books, but come the summer or fall of 2016 here in the States, prior to a certain election that everyone loves to talk about for good reason, the news media kind of churn had just gotten a little bit overwhelming for me, and so I just made a commitment that I wasn't going to read articles really anymore. I mean, not entirely not read them, but try to read way less, kind of news, if you will, and if I caught myself reading that, to try to just go open a book, and that definitely led to a period where I've ended up I spend more time in my Kindle app probably than I do in the WallStreetJournal.com or whatever, and so that I think is at least leads to an existence that's a bit more. You're never reading something that was written within the last 6 or 8 months, because if you do that, because obviously there's a publishing cycle, but I'm not sure that that's all bad.
No, absolutely. Well, look, if you want the ultimate in, keeping your mind focused, starting a business would certainly be doing that. Now, tell me, what was it like starting your own business? What's the journey?
Yeah, we've started a few. I've started a few over the years, so therefore, I can give you any number of those. But if I just focus on the kind of experience we've had over the last 12 plus months in and around turning a number of the work, I mean, by way of background, just for the benefit of the for your benefit, my partner and I have been running a firm called Prehype for the better part of a decade and a half, and the business there has been all to help entrepreneurs start companies, but we've done that and did that and continue to do that in a very hands-on way. You could imagine that as kind of an incubator. And we've had the good fortune of helping some entrepreneurs start some really great companies, both big companies that some people have heard of and many that no one's ever heard of. But we found ourselves in 2020 thinking really hard about like, what do we want the next decade to look like? A, B, what did we feel were the things we'd been doing that were, working? And could we kind of generalize any views out of an analyzing our kind of track record so far that we could maybe lean into further. And then lastly, that's when we first got access to GPT-3,
Yep.
which was the large language model that predated GPT-4, which is what everyone's become more familiar with by way of ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this kind of eye-opening experience of starting to see how you could, at least rely on or work with a computer to generate, text. And when we thought about a lot of the work that we were doing with folks, that's a lot of what we were doing. We were generating, content because we were trying to figure out how do we just, help a entrepreneur get out of their own way, honestly, and get out of their own head, maybe is a less pejorative term, get their ideas down on paper, and most importantly, get them down and get them presented in a way where they could start gathering customer feedback. We were very oriented towards, how do you reduce the amount of time you're spending kind of thinking about your idea and what makes it good or bad or, valuable or not valuable. Like if it's something that you've spent any amount of time thinking about, and if you can anchor it in a view of a customer and a problem, then maybe you should spend most of your time just out trying to kind of talk to that customer, sell to that customer, develop a relationship with that customer. Anyway, so that's kind of and we were doing the work we were doing with GPT-3 at the time just to try to make the experience, if you will, of the entrepreneurs we were working with in this very kind of bespoke and boutique way, better and easier and faster. But very quickly it became clear that maybe this was actually something that we could use to get our ways of working and our perspectives on how you get going, which are certainly not the only ways of working at this stage, but at least are a way. And that we thought we could maybe start making those tools available to many more people. And I think that's really leads to circa middle of last year, when we really were starting to have experiences that made it very obvious to us that there are just a lot of people out there who, if you ask them, would you like to start a business, or have you ever had an idea for a company or a business? The answer from a lot of people is yes. In fact, it's like 60 some odd % of people, both in the States and globally, who, if you ask them, will tell you they've had an idea for a business. And in fact, separately, as like an independent, survey or study, will also tell you that they have the knowledge and the experience and the resources to do it. So you're left to ask yourself, why then do only kind of 8% of people actually take action? And a lot of that, I think we could intuit is not a bad thing. But there is some fraction of that, at least, if not, a meaningful percentage of that kind of gap between vision and action that we feel, can and should be closed, and perhaps is more important even to close in the kind of post AI era, because, I admit that I think a world where, AI is bad for entrepreneurship, i.e. people just kind of continue to use more and more and more the big services from the big companies, is a little bit of a sad one to me. Whereas I think if AI can be something that really supports many, many more people in expressing themselves entrepreneurially, that there can be this kind of golden age of entrepreneurship. And so that's obviously at least a version of the world that we want to see into existence. And so that's what we've been spending all our time on.
Yeah, I tell you what, you've been spending some time ruminating with your business partner over these things, and it's an important thing because you've touched on some of the issues and questions related to AI. Some of the biggest and most well-known people in the world, to remain nameless, have a fear about AI, and you've touched on it, I think, in a roundabout way. But generally, do you see it as a good thing? It's a
I
pretty
think it
loaded
can. I think,
question, I
yeah,
guess,
it's a
but
very tough question. It's a very tough question because I think if you answer it on a yes no basis, you probably miss all the nuance, and
yeah, of course,
I unfortunately am not one for that. But I think it can be. Maybe
yeah,
I'll say I think technology, it is. I struggle to view it in its current. There is, to me, very good reason for people to think really hard about what it is as an innovation. What it is, like what the right way to regulate it is, what the right way to Yeah, I think there's a really good reason why really smart, talented, well-resourced people are really thoughtful about what we're starting to move towards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
So
I'm dealing with it daily. To be honest with you, I'm fascinated by the whole field. I think if we as a I guess a human existence don't move forward and embrace this technology, we may be missing the biggest opportunity in medical, in marketing, in all number of different manners. So I think it's quite a positive thing. But this leads me to asking, what is Audos? What was the genesis? I know that you kind of touched on it, but I'm wondering if you
yeah,
could
yeah, and
explain
I
it.
can be a little more succinct. Sure, 100%. Yeah, Autos is a family of AI co-pilots for entrepreneurs to help them, at least make progress on their next business idea. And we started that business by taking the workflows that we had developed over a decade plus, running our firm Pre-Hype, through which we again had the good fortune of helping entrepreneurs build everything from billion dollar unicorn startups to 7-digit kind of consulting businesses to little side hustles to nonprofit organizations. I mean, we've had a very diverse set of experiences, and we took the kind of knowledge we had from that and both the very theoretical kind of frameworks that we kind of developed over the years to help an entrepreneur, think about what type of business they might like to start themselves, and which is a very personal decision. And maybe is why, like, the book we're writing is called "Me, My Customer, and AI." It is something that is meant to kind of
That's a great title.
try to address these kind of key questions of who are you in this context and what do you want as a founder, because we think that's obviously critical.
Yeah.
But then so we both took our theoretical frameworks as well as our very practical frameworks. Like, what is a decent looking business plan, which we often refer to, or at least Autos context referred to as a customer delight plan, because we view that to be like the first thing that matters the most. So how do we both help kind of frame things theoretically as well as take very practical action, all towards the job of helping someone go from idea to customer feedback and customer engagement and customer relationship development as quickly as possible. And so, practically speaking, what that means is that we have a AI co-pilot. It will feel to people like a version of ChatGPT that runs in an Instagram account of all things.
Yeah.
We can come back to why we did that, but you can chat with and DM our co-pilot in Instagram, and it will take you through a conversational process. And I don't know if it's helpful or if we have even the capacity. I'm happy to demo it or send a demo to. They could go into the show notes, but it'll take you through a couple of questions to very quickly basically ask you, who's the customer you want to serve, what does that person need or want, and why can't they get it? And then it starts to kind of pitch you and brainstorm with you a number of solutions to that problem, and basically running through different business models and how you might kind of solve the problem through varying form factors. And then once you've kind of given it some feedback on that, it says, okay, hold on a second, I'm going to send you a plan in slides. And it goes off and it first of all, it creates a bunch of content, and it comes up with a name for this thing, and it makes a logo and makes a color palette and picks some typography, and then it applies it across this kind of 14 slide framework that we've used over the years. And so it returns that to you. It's really doing that actually to do two things. One is to kind of help you feel like you're not the one having to do all the work, because what we've learned over time with entrepreneurship is just this horrible feeling of kind of loneliness, and just constantly that if you're not the one pushing, that nothing is happening. And so we really are kind of like super interested in what can we do to just give someone this little bit of a breather and a little bit of a feeling of like, oh wait, there's someone else or something else out there that's helping me forward. And so the second thing that it's doing is we view a set of slides as really kind of like the human legible version of a plan, and a human legible version of like how you communicate like what your idea is. Which if you and I sat down and we started talking about a business idea that you have, more often than not, it's you've thought through a lot of it, but it's hard to kind of get it all organized into something discrete. You've thought through the context of like, why does this problem exist even for this customer? What is this problem, and what are the kind of sub elements of it? How do you want to solve it, and like, what are the sub elements of that? What would that experience kind of look like and feel like to the end customer? How would they be onboarded to it, and what's like the kind of magical moment that they're wowed by? What would you maybe charge them for that, and how many of them are out there, and so how big could this opportunity be, and what are the things you're going to do? So there's all these dimensions to even just like describing a business idea in its base form factor. And so we're just trying to kind of like put that all down, put it in a pretty legible format, and put it back to you more often than not, so that the entrepreneur or the person we're talking to immediately very often says, well, yeah, no, that's like fine, but it's not right. It's not what I want, and it's not right for the following 12 reasons. But reacting and giving that feedback is a lot easier for folks than having to create it, in their head and get it all down. So we're very oriented towards that. We call that putting people in edit mode instead of kind of creation mode. And so we're very oriented to that. So it does that, and then it moves very quickly on to do two things, and then I'll stop talking. The first one is that it will allow you to it gives you a link where you can complete a customer interview from the perspective of your customer. So if when you started the conversation, you identified a customer you'd like to serve, it asks you to give that person a name, because it's really trying to kind of make it very visceral whose problem it is we're trying to solve here. But it does say this could be yourself. So oftentimes people are solving their own problem. They're saying, I'm the first customer of this business, and that's a great dynamic, and we're very comfortable with that. But oftentimes they've used another name. But one way or the other, we try to take a customer interview from the perspective of the customer, and we've created a set of models there that ask these questions of you that are not dissimilar of what you might get asked if you like went to, I don't know, Stanford and got a master's in design and went through their whole kind of design thinking process to go through problem identification and need validation. But so it goes through that process, and that's really to help us get much more context for like what this customer is working around. And then finally, for the sake of this conversation, it does two additional things. One is, in response to that, it will give you a product roadmap. It'll basically say, based on this conversation, here are some features that were discussed that maybe are worth kind of thinking about as part of how you might build this out. And we've ranked them both on how important they seem based on how many times they're mentioned in conversation. And oh, by the way, if you go out and give that link that we gave you, the entrepreneur, to other people, the AI will keep track of what they say too, and we'll add it to this roadmap.
Yeah.
And then it's also ranked them based on how hard those features may be developed. And it kind of parks that for a minute, because then what it says is also, and this is the part that gets a little meta, but bear with me.
Yep.
Here is your own AI. And we call this, the AI that we give our customers an auto mate, or a mate for short. And it is a AI that has been informed and configured based on the conversation so far, based on the business idea, to be something that entrepreneurs that are our customers can use to go talk to and befriend and begin to get to know their customers, just as we did with them. And so in the same exact way as we have this conversational onboarding flow, now all of our customers can have that, and that lives at a website. And so they have the equivalent of like a landing page, if you will, but it's a landing page that doesn't just talk at you as a customer, as an end customer. It's actually something that can listen to you and respond to you, and then it even can be equipped with tools. And so just as our mate, which our customers talk to get started, is capable of generating slides, for example, these mates that we provide to our customers can be given tools to do all sorts of things. They can, if you upload an image, it can see what's in the image. And so we have customers who, for example, are using that to help provide gift recommendations to their customers by taking a screenshot of a person's Instagram profile, analyzing the style of the person in the profile, and then providing gift recommendations. We have people who are taking input from their customer and then generating them a document, which is a plan of some variety, or a schedule, or a diet. So there's all sorts of these things, but they're really all meant towards this very, putting our entrepreneur in the position of serving a customer need as quickly as possible, even if it's only in a very thin way, but just as a way of starting to develop rapport with the customer, as a way of not making it that they're saying, hey, I'm going to make this thing in the future. If you'd like to be notified when we launch, you can put your email address in, which by the way, like I've done plenty of over the years, and it's not wrong, but I just think it can be better, because now you can actually make an exchange of value. You can very quickly train your AI to do something for the customer and not just kind of ask them for their contact information to be served later.
Basic stuff. Yep.
And that dynamic, both the compression of the time between I've got an idea and I'm putting something in front of customers, A, but also B, I'm not just putting something in front of them, but I'm actually trying to do something to serve them, to provide some value to them, provide some experience that builds trust with them, so that when I do call them or text them or just message them in whatever format, but when I'm ready to serve them again, that they actually respond because they had this, positive experience with me initially, is what we view to be like the first gravity well of entrepreneurship. That if you can kind of get out of that, now you're again, you maybe not in business, but you're in service. And I think that's incredibly powerful to our customers. They do all of that, by the way, every single thing up to that moment they do for free.
Yeah.
And we're just having an amazing, set of experiences and results. We are incredibly fortunate to get to, provide that service to people, because the diversity of things that they're interested in and the customer profiles they want to help serve are just inspiring in many respects, and certainly make you, if you go back to your AI question, at least in this corner of the AI world, I can say for sure that I view it to be massively positive to
I absolutely agree. That was such an in-depth explanation of the entire process. So I really do appreciate that. Now, what I'd always try to do my best research prior to every single call, Nick, and I found the link.
Okay.
And then I followed the link, and then I ended up on Audos, but I ended up then going to Instagram. And at that point in time, I was confused for a moment, and I thought, why am I here? And then all of a sudden, I was in this new world, this brand new experience that I'd never seen anything like. You talked about the question and response, and then you talked about the generation, and please wait for a moment while I compile this information to best suit you and your questions and what your aspirations are. I followed the entire process down to the point where I got the presentation. I was then given, like a meeting request to set up, which at that point I stopped because I learned enough.
Well, here we are. We're having our meeting. Yeah, exactly.
My goodness. I have to say, it is really, really cool. It is really, really powerful. And I know that it's helping people. But if you could step it down into, say, 4 or 5 core pieces and condense it in its total form from start to finish, how I would have found it, through to the point that somebody actually speaks to a human being, could you do that for us?
Yes. We allow entrepreneurs to do 4 things. 1, talk to a AI Copilot to frame up their business idea in a very simple and consumable form factor. 2, generate a customer delight plan, as we call it, but to most it would look a lot like a business plan in slide format, and to kind of iterate on that plan. 3, complete a customer interview, and then share a link at which other friends and contacts and colleagues can complete the same interview, so as to compile a repository of customer insights that can then in turn inform a product roadmap. And lastly, 4, we create for entrepreneurs a proto distribution strategy by way of configuring for them their own AI that they can use to befriend their customers, and begin to be in service of customer needs. And so across those 4 offerings, we are able to compress the time and work from having an idea to being in conversation with real customers who are strangers to you, which is probably important, massively, to within a few hours if you're so inclined, and put you in position to at that point not be making progress, not because you can't get out of your own head, but because you're choosing kind of not to at that point.
I tell you what, this is an amazing tool, and if you're on today's call and you don't go check this out, you're missing out, because I've followed the process and I found it absolutely fascinating, because what it's doing is it's simplifying the important questions for you. It's taking away, I guess, in many respects, the need to create that plan on your own, because I can tell you, if you're doing this on your own, you've never done it before, creating a plan and understanding how you want to go from that, I guess, that ideation through to having something in front of you is very, very powerful. So when people want to find Audos, Nick, where are they going to go? What is the process from here?
Yeah. You go to audos.com, and as you said, Rick, you immediately are sent to our Instagram page. That'll change soon enough. So depending on when you when this comes to air, you may go to audos.com and have the option to either go to and do it on Instagram if that's more comfortable, or just go ahead and have the conversation with our AI in the browser. But for the moment, you'll go to Instagram and you can just DM our account. I don't think you have to follow it, but you can follow it and then DM us if you want. You just send a message to it as if you were reaching out to, I don't know, if you follow Nike and you want to send them a message.
It's pretty easy.
It's not different from that, and then you'll get a response, and then that'll start a conversation. And it just so happens that instead of having, actually, in addition to having, we've learned over time that we have actually an interplay, and I don't know, I should have thought to look and see if you'd been through there, but we have an interplay between our customer service team is available, and so both the customer and the AI actually can both kind of say, hey, I'm going to ask the Audos team to jump in here, and what we've found is over time that's often very valuable. Sometimes they have questions that we've particularly told the Copilot not to directly address, because we feel like they can be better, addressed by a human in conversation. And so, there are humans who are available, if you will, in that thread. But by default, you would be talking to our AI Copilot, and then pretty quickly, you got there, Rick. You will kind of finish a discussion with the AI in Instagram, and you might start to have a more traditional product experience at that place, because you will be dropped into a dashboard where you can configure this mate in particular, which is this AI that you can use. It's kind of your AI landing page, if you will, but that you can use to start kind of engaging your customers and acquiring customers. And so that'll look very much more traditionally like a software product to people.
Of course, yep. But it's early days, and there is so much to do, so much work in the background. And, what you've done so far is an absolute credit to you. I'm very excited for Audos. And in closing, Nick, where are people going to go? What is the website address to start?
Yeah, sorry. Audos.com is AUDOS.com.
That's easy. Well, look, if you're on today's call, you've enjoyed what you've heard, and you're fascinated, as I am, to learn more, go check it out. I tell you, you're not going to miss out. If you go to the link that's provided below this call, no matter where you see this call, you're going to find that link back to Audos. It's going to blow your mind. It's really that exciting. With all that being said, Nick, this has been a fascinating call. Thank you so very much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate it.